Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to do a little video. I did get inspiration from Nikki Raven. I do follow her and I'll link her channel down in my description box. But she's not the first person to do this style video, but I did recently watch her post, which was probably maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe even longer actually. By the time I post this, could have been a month ago, I'm not sure, where she goes through and she picks palettes from brands that she would keep. Obviously out of the brands that she has more than one palette, so it's more like, you know, if I had to get rid of all of my palettes from these brands, these are the ones that I would actually keep. Now, when I looked through my collection, I have so many brands where I've only just got the one palette, so obviously I've excluded those. And then there are just a few brands, mostly I would say cheaper end brands, if I can say that, or more affordable brands where I do purchase more palettes from them, as opposed to maybe a high end where it's Natasha Denona. I only have one palette from her. And yeah, it's a little bit of a mix. A lot of these you would have seen on my channel before because I have spoken about them many times, and there's no surprise really. Maybe one or two you might be surprised by, but otherwise I think the majority of you will be like, well, yes, she talks about that palette all the time, I'm not surprised she picked it. But basically, yeah, I'm going to just go through all the palettes that I would keep if I had to get rid of all the palettes in my collection from these brands, and I can only keep one of them. These are the ones that I would keep. So I'm going to do it in no particular order. I think Nikki did it alphabetically, but I'm not going to do it alphabetically. So the first one I'm going to start with is Nars. I actually have two palettes from Nars, and the second palette that I have, I just got at Christmas. So, you know, it's kind of hard to judge it because I haven't really used it a lot at all. However, first impressions, I still prefer the Afterglow palette, which I've had for a few years now. This one I just think is so beautiful, and I think the quality in this one is better. However, I did say in one of my videos, I'm hoping that the quality is just as good in the newest one that I have. I don't know, I just think this is better, and I really like this color story, and this shade is just so beautiful. I actually probably would hit pan in it if I use this palette a little bit more, but it's just a really good quality palette. And I don't know, it's kind of pricey, it's kind of bougie. I did get it on sale, but it is quite expensive for what it is because you don't get that many shades. You know, Nars is not I would say it's mid-range to more like high-end. It's not like an affordable brand at all, but I really do like this color story. But I just think the quality is actually really good compared to the other one that I have. And the other one's a little bit more cool tone, a little bit darker. This one's a little bit brighter, warmer. And I don't know, it kind of appeals to me a little bit more. So I would absolutely keep this one over my other one. Next up, I will go through ABH. And this won't come as a shock. I mean, I did hum and ah a little bit over two palettes. I think the Nouveau palette that I have is good, but it's just doesn't, you know, win my heart over the other two that I have. So I have the Norvina and I have the Jackie Aina palette, and for a long time I thought the Jackie Aina palette was my favorite palette, and it's still really high up there. However, and I was actually going to pick it, but I was looking at them side by side and I had to pick my Norvina, as boring as that is, because I think really at the end of the day I would want to keep this over the Jackie Aina, because in the Jackie Aina you've got 6 shades, which is less than half of the palette that I really, really love. And then the rest of the palette, there's a lot of pinks and purples, which are not my favorite. However, in this palette, there is not one shade that I do not like. And I think I have to realize that, you know, for that one reason, this one would win over that one. Even though I think the Jackie Aina has a little bit more of an interesting color story, it has more depth. It has some shades that are very, very stunning, that are some of my favorite shades in my whole collection. I think as a whole, I would be happier to keep this palette. Even though this one's not discontinued, and Jackie Aina I think is discontinued, so that one would be more of a special palette. It would break my heart if I didn't have that palette, but I think I would get more use out of this one, so I had to pick this one for this video. But even now I'm kind of thinking, did I make the right choice? I'm not sure. Next up, we've got Juvia's Place. So Juvia's Place, I have 3 palettes, and 3, oh no, I've got 4 palettes. They're all quite small palettes. I don't have any of the bigger palettes. Out of all the palettes that I have, I would definitely keep the rustic bronze, or bronze rustic, yeah, bronze rustic over the others. I just prefer the color story. I really love this color here. It is very unique in my collection. And I also really like the shimmer down here. The other palettes I have are just not unique enough for me to keep over this one. So this one would definitely win, and I've put a lot of use into this one, as you can see, because I have a pan in it. But yeah, this one I would absolutely keep over the others. Moving on, we've got Alter Ego. So this one, I've got 3 palettes from Alter Ego, and I discovered this brand last year, and I absolutely love all of my palettes, and I really love the quality. But when I've looked at, I mean, this one absolutely I would keep over the other 2 Alter Egos because it is by far my favorite out of the 3, but also it's the sort of the only cool tone palette that I have. So I would definitely keep the Shadow Kiss, which is a Natasha Denona dupe for the Glam palette. And I just really like the, as I said, the cool tones. It's the only palette that I have that has these cool tones, these grays, these silvers, these taupey shades. I don't have any palette like this in my collection, so I'd absolutely have to keep it regardless of what happens. But it also gives me more joy than the other 2 Alter Ego palettes that I have, which I really, really love as well. So I would absolutely keep this one. This was like the easiest choice I made out of all of these because it's just a no-brainer. It's one of my favorite palettes in my collection. Oops, that was my computer. And yeah, I just think it's just the best. Okay, moving on, we'll go to Primark. So Primark, I have, I want to say maybe 4 palettes, 6 palettes, no, 5 palettes. Oh my gosh, I'm all over the place. I would have had 6. I did depot 1. I've got 5 palettes left. So I've got 2 9 pans, 3 9 pans, sorry, and then a, maybe an 8 pan one, and then I've got this one. So this one I would keep. This is the Rose Quartz. This is one of my oldest palettes as well, from Primark, but also in my collection. And I just get more joy out of this one out of the others that I have. I just don't see myself keeping those for a long time. They are what they are, they're there. This one I don't need to keep around, but I have kept around for whatever reason. I don't know why. It is not the best quality. The color story is not that interesting, but I can make some really beautiful looks with this, and I just have in the past, and for that reason I kind of just, I would want to keep this. It also has more shades in it. I don't know, there's something about this palette that I don't know, I like. I can't explain it. I would absolutely keep this one over my other Primark palettes, and I think the quality is pretty good in this one compared to the others. Okay, next up we've got Beauty Bay. So this one was also an easy one for me. I've recently got a lot of Beauty Bay palettes in Christmas, and you know, I'm working my way through them, but I'm not at the point that I would want to really save any of those over the one palette that I had for longer, which was the Book of Magic. Now this obviously was limited edition, but I think I just have an affinity with this palette. I have a lot of pans in this palette. I really enjoy it. It's not perfect by any means. I think the quality in the newer Beauty Bay palettes is probably a little bit nicer actually than what I have in this palette, just from what I've seen so far. But the quality in this is still stunning, and it hasn't gone bad or anything like that. I just think Beauty Bay quality has just gotten better and better. But this would have all the blues that I would ever need, because I don't really wear that much blue, but when I do wear blue, this is perfect for me. So if I were just to keep these palettes in my collection and get rid of everything else, this has a lot of shades in here that these other palettes that I would keep from these brands don't. So that's one reason, but just as I said, I've had this one longer than the other Beauty Bay palettes that I own, and I love it more. And I just think it's I don't know, it's more unique at this point. And I haven't fallen in love with the newer ones yet, but I haven't had enough time with them. So yeah, I would keep this one over the other ones. It's also more special, limited edition. I would just want to keep it. Okay, moving on, we've got Urban Decay. So Urban Decay, I actually only have 2 palettes. I've only ever had the Naked, like the original Naked palette. I've never tried any other Naked palettes. And then when the Stone Vibes came out, I had to have it. So this one I would absolutely keep over my original Naked because the quality is stunning in this palette and so different from the Naked palettes. The formula is just different. These shimmers are gorgeous and I have really had so much fun with this palette, and it's taken me a little bit to, I guess, fall in love with it, but the more I've used it, the more I have, and I just really enjoy it. And I would definitely want to keep this over my original Naked because the original Naked is, yeah, it's an original. I'm keeping it for that reason, but it's boring. And this one's not boring, and I don't know why they don't do palettes like this, because I know a lot of people didn't like this, but this is really good, so I don't really care what people say. This is so much better than their Naked palettes that they keep coming out with that nobody seems to enjoy. So yeah, I would absolutely keep this one, and the packaging is gorgeous, so yeah, have to keep this one. Okay, moving on to e.l.f. I did have 3 e.l.f. palettes, but I depotted one of them, so I'm not gonna, you know, count that one at all. So I've only got an 18-pan palette and a 4-pan palette left. So out of those two, I would absolutely keep my Retro Paradise, which is actually my pan matte palette for the year. If you don't know already, I mean, where have you been? I talk about it all the time and I'm trying to really get through it. But yeah, this one I would keep just because you have a variety. I'm working on it already. The 4-pan is the Berry Bad, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good travel size palette, but do I need to keep it in my collection? No. I would much rather keep this in my collection, keep working on it, and it has a little bit more variety in the colors here. And I just like it better. So I would definitely keep this over my other one. And then obviously I depotted the other 18-pan palette because I just thought it was terrible. So I would not have kept that if I hadn't depotted it, which was the Electric Mood. I thought it was awful. Okay, then we have BH Cosmetics. So BH Cosmetics, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4. I think I have 4 palettes from them. I always get this wrong, so I have 4 or 5. I think it's 4. And this one was a pretty easy one for me as well. Just simply because I think the one that I've picked has a good variety. It has a lot of shades that I love. And that's all I need to give, really. I'm going to keep the Summer in Saint-Tropez. I just think out of the ones that I have, this is the nicest. And yes, I don't particularly like this quad, and I've said that many times. You can make it work. I can't deny the formula, and this is beautiful. Although the formula is beautiful in all the palettes that I have all of the older palettes, and the formula is stunning and amazing, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think as a color story, and in terms of the variation that you get in, you know, this palette, I think it's the better one out of the ones that I have. I have Chilling in Chicago, I've got the Blueberry Muffin, I've got Avocado Toast, and I think I prefer this one. And this one was the cheapest. I only got this for £5. It was like an add-on to the purchase. I didn't think I was gonna like it, and then I started using it like a year after I bought it. I held on to it for so long. I finally started using it, and I was such an idiot for not using it. I think it definitely is my favorite. I just think these shimmers are also, I don't know, unmatched really, to be honest. I would definitely want to keep this in my collection because it just brings me so much joy every time I use it. Alright, so moving on, we've got ColourPop. I wouldn't be able to tell you how many ColourPop palettes I have because I haven't counted them. There is a lot. And to be honest with you, I do not know if I've made the right choice here. I've chosen this palette because I think at the end of the day, it's probably my favorite palette that I have from ColourPop. It's also the first palette that I ever tried at ColourPop. The formula isn't as good as it used to be. So I think I would keep this just for the nostalgia, just for the memory, and maybe not so much because it is a palette that I would be able to continue using for the next 5 years or so, because I don't think it has that much life left to it. It is a monochromatic palette, which surprises me, and I couldn't bring myself to pick any other palette. So I've gone with the Miss Bliss. I know. I don't know if I've done the right thing here. I was even looking at the Hocus Pocus 2 palette because I really do like that and I think it's interesting, but I don't think, I don't think I would keep it over the Miss Bliss. I think at the end of the day, I would want to keep the Miss Bliss because of what it is. I did a ColourPop first impressions video. This was the first palette that I tried. I loved the quality of the formula at the time. I thought it was beautiful. I've really enjoyed this palette the whole time I've had it. It has some beautiful shimmers, beautiful shades. It's light, it's airy, it's fun, it's easy to use, and for a monochromatic palette, it's fine. I don't mind that it is so light and airy. And I wouldn't want to part with it. So I think that's why I picked it, because I wouldn't want to say goodbye to this palette. So yeah, this one I would keep. Surprisingly, I'm not sure if I've done the right thing here, but I couldn't bring myself to pick anything else, even though I have some other palettes from ColourPop that I really do like. I think I would have to keep this one. Okay, so moving on, we've got Oden's Eye. I've got 3 palettes from Oden's Eye. They are older palettes, and I'm not the biggest fan of Oden's Eye, as you can imagine from all the comments I've said about Oden's Eye. But out of the 3 that I own, this one in particular has the best formula, so I have to keep it. It's not the one that I prefer in terms of color story though. But formula-wise, I think at the end of the day, I would much rather have a better quality formula over like an interesting color story, because even if I don't care for this color story, I can dip into 1 or 2 shades and use a different palette because I know this formula is good. So I'm picking the Verdandi. I got this in a mystery box, so I didn't pick this one. I didn't pick any of them. And this is definitely not my favorite color story at all, as I've just said. However, there are no dead shades in here. The quality of these special shimmers in the middle are just outstanding, and much better than the other palettes that I received from Oden's Eye in the mystery box. So I got the Alva and I got the Mini Ocean palette. I really like the Mini Ocean palette color story and the Alva color story, but the formula just let me down. So I would definitely keep this one over those. And maybe one day I will try Oden's Eye again. I'm getting warmer to the idea of doing it. Everybody says it's so good, and that I would like the new quality, but I just haven't brought myself to buy anything yet. All right, moving on, we've got Makeup Revolution. I did have a Makeup Obsession palette, but I depotted it, so I'm not going to count that. But right now I have 3 Makeup Revolution palettes. They're all the tin palette versions. And this is a little bit... This was a little bit tricky actually, and surprising to me. I think out of the 3 palettes that I have, this palette is probably still my favorite. However, there are so many issues with this palette. So I'm not saying it's like the best palette in the world, but out of my Makeup Revolution palettes, I think I would keep this one over the other 2. The other 2 are newer to me. This one is the oldest one that I have. And also, I was looking to see all the palettes that I saved so far, and this palette kind of works because it's green. So I would pick my Chilled palette, and I don't really have any green palettes that I've saved so far from these other brands, so I would still want to keep some greens in my collection. Are these the best greens in my collection? No, but out of the 3 palettes that I have from Revolution, this is the one that I've used the most, I've loved the most. I will say what lets this palette down are the 3 glitter shades. They're just a waste of space. I do not like them, I do not use them, and so I would rather they be filled with something else. So it's a palette that I don't love all the shades, which is kind of annoying. However, yeah, I love the color story, and actually it has some pretty like creamy shades. Not that one. This one and this one are pretty decent creamy shades. Has some brownie nudes over here as well, which I enjoy, and then the green that you need. And there are some pretty green shades too that I really like, and kind of grungy shades, and then more grassy shades. So yeah, actually I really do like this palette for what it is, but it's not my best palette. All right, moving on to Nomad. I have 3 palettes from Nomad, 4 palettes from Nomad. Is it 4 or 3? I have, how many do I have? I have 3 palettes from Nomad. 3, yes, 3. And this has been my favorite the whole time. I picked up 2 palettes originally, the Cartagena Magica and the Tokyo palette, all together in a bundle, and then I tried the Fête de Provence. However, this one has just remained my favorite. It's probably the one that I've spoken the least about recently, but it is the Cartagena Magica. I think this is so stunning and so beautiful, and the reason that I'm choosing this, because I honestly think that the other palettes are very beautiful and they're fun, and they've got, a lot of colors to them. The Tokyo palette's a good pastel palette, which I'm not keeping any pastel palettes, I've just realized, so I wouldn't really have any pastel shades to keep in my collection from brands, but I just think that the shimmer quality is different in the Tokyo versus this one. These do not get hard pan from my experience so far. They are stunning, stunning, beautiful, beautiful kind of shifty shades, some of them, and they just don't get hard pan like my other palette. And I noticed in the Fête de Provence that was starting to get a little bit of hard pan too. So whatever happened with this palette, this is the quality that I like. And I don't know if their newer palettes are like this. I would hope so, but this is just stunning. I also really like the color story. I have not used it enough, even though I have 2 pans in it. I know I haven't used this enough, so I can't wait to use this more this year. But yeah, I would absolutely keep this one over the other 2. All right, and then the last palette that I have to share with you is from Huda Beauty. So this one might surprise some people, and to be honest, it kind of surprised me, but it also made a little bit of sense. I don't think this is my favorite Huda Beauty palette that I own. I've got 3, they're all the bigger size palettes, and I don't think this is my favorite, but I think if I were to keep anything, I think I would want to keep this one over the other 2. And I don't really have a good explanation for it at this point. I'm going to keep my Naughty Nude. I have the Mercury Retrograde. I also have the Desert Dusk. I really love the Desert Dusk, but the quality is not as good as the other 2. Mercury Retrograde, I really, really love. And I think that's probably my favorite out of the 3. But as an everyday palette, it's not ideal for me. It has those pops of blues, and it's just not an everyday palette to me. And also, ever since I purchased it, even though I love it and I do look at it and I think it's so beautiful, I have not used it nearly as enough as I've not used it nearly as much as I've used the Naughty Nude. And I think at the end of the day, the Naughty Nude has more of that everyday feeling for me, or like, I don't know. It's a palette that I can grab, I can make a beautiful look. It has a little bit of redundancy in some of the shades. They're not too different from each other, so the variety in this palette is not the best. However, I can't deny quality. Like, formula is great, but the formula is great in the Mercury Retrograde. I just think I like this one a little bit more for like an everyday palette where I can just use this every single day, because I've done a 3 looks 1 palette with this, and I also did a project level up where I hit 2 pans in it. I was level 2, and during that time I actually ended up liking it a lot more than previously, even though I'd used the palette quite a lot previous to that. So whatever happened when I did my project level up 2 for this palette, I ended up actually falling in love with this palette. So I would keep this over my Mercury Retrograde, which actually kind of breaks my heart, but I think that's what I would do now. If you ask me in 2 months' time or 2 weeks' time, I might change my mind, but I think today I would keep the Naughty Nude over Mercury Retrograde, because I've just had more pleasure using it. I've had more time to use it, even though I had the Mercury Retrograde a little bit longer. Doesn't make sense, but that is what it is. So that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.